Hello, hello, hello! Welcome back to my deep dive of one of my favorite books of all time, When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. In this video, I will be diving into not only chapters 3, but also chapters 4 and 5. And even though I will be talking about the events of chapters 3, 4, and 5, I will most likely be bringing in things from the entire book. So if you haven't finished reading When the Moon Hatched, please don't spoil it for yourself. Go read the book and then come back when you finish, because I would love to talk about this with anyone and everyone. Right, now, diving in. Last we left off, Rave was leaving the tavern with a very damning piece of paper in her pocket and a slimy oaf of a man on her tail. Just as she had planned, well, at least half of it was as she had planned. The other half of that statement was most definitely not something she had planned, nor was what will come of it. As Rave leads Tarek down tunnels and alleyways, she opens herself up to the creators. If you watched my first episode, it will be no surprise to us that she can speak to the creators, though it shouldn't come as a shock to anyone because we've all read the entire book. Right? Right. Well, we get to finally meet one of our 4 creators. She's perhaps the loosest cannon of them all, Claude. Not only do we get to see Claude in action, but we also get to witness Rave in action, and she so easily incapacitates Tarek that there is no question as to why she's the best quote-unquote employee that the AF has. As Rave is giving her villain monologue, we learn exactly why Tarek is Rave's mark, because let me be totally clear here, he was not chosen by the AF, he was chosen by Rave to take down, and not only did she choose this mission, but she also funded this mission. She continues to lecture him as she carves important letters onto his chest. Only after his begging for mercy and fully understands what a terrible person he is, does Rave finally finish what she came to do. And that is where chapter 3 ends. Chapter 4 opens with Rave cleaning up the mess she just made by tossing Tarek over the wall. As she's leaving the crime scene, she finds a poster hung up that speaks on the reward that will be given to any who aid the crown in finding the Fear to Ath. Just as she's destroying this piece of parchment, essentially calling for her destruction, Khan enters. Stage right. But before Rave has a chance to exit, stage left, he grabs her wrist, intending to get the information out of her as to who she is. He knows that she lied. Rave, on the other hand, has other plans. She brings an iron blade up to his crotch and threatens to sever his member if he doesn't let go. Which, thankfully, he does, but not before subtly letting her know he isn't her enemy. We begin chapter 5 visualizing what retirement would look like for Rave, and settling on the fact that she probably won't be any good at it. Before Rave is completely done daydreaming, she heads over to a sky bridge that spans the gap between the 2 walls, lies down, closes her eyes, and dreams of being a dragon. Big foreshadowing here, we will touch on that. Once her mind lands back on solid ground, she pulls out the parchment lark that she received at the Hungry Hollow, and it's from Essie, and it is Essie's version of a grocery list. But in its own way, it is also a very subtle platonic love letter. While going over the list, Rave contemplates just how Essie came into her life, like a lost kitten in a dog-eat-dog world, and wonders just how she managed to get herself attached when she promised herself no attachments. All right, that was the summary of all 3 chapters we will be covering, and now we get to dive into the nitty-gritty bits of the story. Back to chapter 3. As we leave the tavern, Rave gives us a clearer picture of what the world looks like. We learn that there is an immense stone wall that runs as far as the eye can see, and it's mentioned in the glossary that it belts around the entire world. The wall is split down the middle in places, and it's in one of these cracks in the walls that the folk of this region have carved their living spaces. This space is called the Ditch. It is so densely populated because they feel safer inside this split and away from the predators from both the shade and the burn, though I feel that's more of a placebo effect than it is the actual truth. This wall also goes as high as the eye can see from its base. If you were to walk up every flight of stairs to the top, you would practically be among the dragons hanging in the sky like moons themselves. It's on one of these upper levels that Rave removes the small iron ring from her middle finger and is welcomed by a cacophony of sound. That sound being all of the creators and her ability to hear them, now granted because she isn't touching iron anymore. Notice I said all of the creators, not just one, as she will have you believe in the beginning here. The hint we get as to who Rave may truly be lies in the details of this quote, and the fact that she can hear all of the creators. The quote goes, when I'm only a few steps away from the deadly plummet to the ground below, I dig into my pocket and ease off my iron ring, exposing myself to a riot of song that threatens to mince my brain into a fine sludge. Fucking mayhem. The tendons in my neck stretch, the veins in my temples pulsing with too much rushing blood and song. I tune my mind to the highest frequency, like tuning a sound snare, then cap the opening with a sieve, isolating Claude's manic melody blaring at the top of her billowing lungs. I would like to point out a few things here, starting with the unique magic system that this world has. I mentioned before that in order to be able to wield the magic, you have to first be able to hear the creators. And once you can do that, you have to be able to sing their songs. Sarah A. Parker described it in an interview like learning a new language. You not only have to learn to listen to it and read it, but you also have to learn to speak it back. The other thing that Sarah A. Parker hints about here is what Rave is capable of, and in turn, who she is. Within this quote, she essentially tells us that Rave can hear all of the creators. She says that the noise is threatening to mince her brain into a fine sludge. It's fucking mayhem. Just like they all sang at the same time and minced Kalis up and put him in the Aether Stone. So that's one hint that she can hear them all. And the other hint is that it says that she removes the iron band and is met with a cacophony of voices, not just one voice. And lastly, it's the fact that she has to work to narrow it down to just one voice lets us know that she hears more than one. Therefore, hints us in the direction of who Rave truly is. She does all of this with no time to spare as Tarek is upon her and unwilling to let his prey go. Rave uses Claude to help incapacitate him by sucking almost all of the air out of his lungs before she uses one of Essie's glorious inventions to implant an iron pin in the top of his foot, nullifying his ability to speak to the creators, invariably taking his power away. Remember, iron means no creator's songs, which means no magic. It's a good thing that Rave has this invention from Essie, or Tarek would have been much harder to deal with, and Rave would have had to battle against Ignos as well. We do get a small bit of Rave's history here as she mentions Ignos. She says, "The god of fire loves to feast, and I'd rather be skinned alive than have him gnaw on me again." Now, we know that she has a fiery past, and it's obviously not the enjoyable type of bonfire type fire. I think more burn victim type fiery past. We'll go over this history when it comes up later in the book, but know that these bad memories of being tortured with Ignos are from her time with the Scavenger King, and is probably why he refers to her as his fire lark. Though Rave has more reason than most to hate people like Tarek, and I'm referring to her time spent with the Scavenger King and how similar it most likely is to the life of many of the children in Tarek's care, it is safe to say that we all want him to suffer a bit. The start of that suffering comes in the form of a severed hand, as Rave needs it to complete the mission that she is on for the Ath. Once we have the severed appendage, we begin the villain monologue. Rave so graciously lays out all of Tarek's offenses as though he were on a trial, though we already know who the judge and jury are. Tarek is accused of running a proverbial city within the Undercity itself, one that boasts a battle pit large enough to host full-on performances and houses cells full of children. Null children whose families are in such dire need that the parents sold them to him thinking that they bought their child a chance to battle their way out of poverty, though we all know this simply isn't true. Which is where the hand comes in. It is needed to unlock their cells and free them. He's also accused of abusing his bound and their children, especially his son, who is a null. In finding him guilty of all charges, guilty, Rave carves the letters of his misdoings onto his chest. An R for rapist, a CA for child abuser, and ASS, simply because you can't be the other two without also being an ass. Rave, who assures us that the Ath is going to save the children and have already helped to escort Tarek's bound and their children out of the city. Then she finally puts Tarek to rest, clearing the world of one more scumbag. While she's going through Tarek's misdoings, there is a line I would like to point out that gives us a hint as to what the quote-unquote other is on a reread. On an initial read, we haven't met the other yet, so we don't know that there is another being inside of her. But this is a foreshadowing piece to who the other is, especially on a reread. The quote goes, "The words are forced past gritted teeth, that immense icy presence within me, shifting, rumbling." The other is described here as being immense, icy, and rumbling, which is just yet another nod to the fact that the other is from a very cold place and is a very large creature of some sort, aka a dragon from the shade, a moon plume. Slashra. All right, diving into chapter 4. Placing the iron ring back on her finger, Rave closes off the creators once more. We learn here that before she had the ring, she learned to tune them out. It's likely how she's so adept at tuning into the frequency of just one creator when she isn't wearing the ring, as all of the creators are calling for her attention, like we saw before. One of the biggest and best nuggets of information on the magic system is actually given right here, and it says, "It's said, the louder one hears the elemental songs, the greater the connection, the more power one can derive from learning their language and speaking their words." Rave hears all of the creators, but she has to strain to hear Claude and Boulder to funnel it down to just those two creators. We later see her introduced to Rain, and Rain is so loud that she can't tune her out. Keep that in mind. She's overwhelmed with Rain's feelings, the feeling of unbearable sadness. And this is really important when we talk about the mind weft in the burn, as he mentions that there aren't many elementals who can speak with Rain, and just how powerful of a creator she is, especially with an entire kingdom covered in her powdery snow. Hiding her face once again, lest someone walk up on the scene that she just created, Rave pulls up her veil and checks all directions before turning back toward Tarek's body. She has thought through all available options for her to dispose of the body and decides tossing it over the side towards the shade is going to be the best solution. The strength that this woman has to have is insane. She's able to pick up a man who is easily 2 times her size, height and weight-wise, heft him up onto the wall, and then get underneath him and push him up and over. In my wildest dreams would this be possible. Just bonkers. As Rave goes to leave, her eyes catch on a piece of parchment hung on the wall. This parchment mentions the reward I spoke about in chapter 2. It's a call to arms against the Fear Ath, painting them as the bad guys, and trying to sell the narrative that it's because the Ath is stealing the children conscripted to the Crown's army and headed to Drelgad for training, that the rest of the kingdom is weak and vulnerable to attack. I would personally like to know who they think will attack them. Cadoc's brother, his twin, who is the ruler of the Shade, and so far as I'm aware, on good terms with the king? Khan would be the obvious answer, as he was the one to kill their father, but so far as I know, he hasn't given them any reason to make them think that he will attack. Does Cadoc truly believe that the Ath will attack? I mean, if so, it's yet another reason that if Arkan is the Elding Bird, my brain would explode. It would also make sense as to why he is stealing elemental children and building his own army to take on Khan's army and then take on his other brothers. But it could very well be just a simple scare tactic to get the people to do what the Crown is asking of them and to turn any information on the Ath in. I would like to know just where they're taking the children they quote-unquote free. I know it's mentioned in the next chapter that they take them to the Flourish, which is said to be somewhere in the south and underground. But where underground in the south? And to do what? To build an army, like I just suggested? The fight in the pits, like Rave did? I don't know, and it bothers me. The Crown doesn't just use fear-mongering to get people to turn in the Ath. They also offer up quite the reward for anyone who's willing to and able to give any information in. As I mentioned in Chapter 2's episode, any information that proves fruitful will receive 10 buckets worth of bloodstone and complimentary accommodations on the north side of the wall for 3 phases. Now that is a lot of dough, and to a population that is starving, it's quite the incentive. Understandably, Rave rips the piece of parchment from the wall and crumples it up in her palm to toss it off of the wall, but not before she runs into Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome himself. Welcome back to the chat, Khan! He grabs her wrist, yes, the one holding the piece of the parchment. Cue my intake of breath on a first read, though my intake of breath on this read is for an entirely different reason. Sarah A. Parker is so freaking clever. She slipped in yet another bit of foreshadowing here into Khan's description. Actually, his description has so many foreshadowing bits, and that's majority of what my foreshadowing section of this chapter will be on. The first quote I'm going to pull says, "He's harshly chiseled, raw, fiercely beautiful. My lungs pull full of his scent, so deep and drugging, like smelted stone topped with a ladle of cream. Chiseled? Smelted stone? Hello, Boulder! I definitely read right over all of these foreshadowing goodies the first time, but now that I'm on the hunt, I'm picking out as many as I can find. And let me tell you, Sarah A. Parker has seamlessly woven in so many of them that I'm even missing some of them on the first time that I read through a chapter for this deep dive. It's just nuts. Thankfully, not all of the foreshadowing bits are as sneaky as Khan's elemental aptitudes. His personal history foreshadowing, for example, is a bit more on the nose. The quote says, "His brows are thick, the lower half of his face shaded by a dark beard that adds a rugged texture to his already robust appearance, like he belongs in one of the renowned warrior clans that took root amongst the Boltanic plains millions of phases ago, wielding an axe and a bloodlusting roar." He did indeed belong to one of those Boltanic plains warrior clans, the Jokul clan to be specific, who we will meet later on down the road in the book. Though some of Khan's sizing and muscling can definitely have come from this time spent with that Jokul clan, a lot of it has to do with his Daga-Mork bond with Raigún, which is foreshadowed here. In this quote says, "He's showcasing as a null, minus the clip, and I know better than to assume he doesn't hear any of the elemental songs, especially given the immense energy rolling off of him, shoving against me, making me feel as if he's so much bigger than the space he's currently inhabiting, which is a lot. Being a head and a half taller than me, his broad chest and shoulders reminding me of a saber scythe, the bold, muscular sort of build often found in those with strong roots to the burn, the hot, ever-sunny northern kingdom." This quote has a couple of different pieces about Khan's history and personality that I'm going to be pulling. The first being the foreshadowing to Khan being a Daga-Mork. Khan is described here as feeling larger than he truly is. He's being compared to a saber scythe. A Daga-Mork is described as one so bonded with their dragon that they can harness its strength and fire. This connection is more myth than reality. So I find it very, very interesting that he's not only mentioned as feeling larger than he is, but also gets referenced as reminding her of a saber scythe, which is the breed of dragon that Raigún is. Beautiful. The second bit of foreshadowing from this quote is about his build and how it reminds Rave of men often found in the burn, which is exactly where Khan comes from. Now, I know a lot of this is descriptive foreshadowing because Rave can't stop staring, but I mean, who can blame her? He is a very handsome man. He smells very good, and he is standing very close to her, putting her in quite a predicament given what she just did. So she isn't just admiring him, she's also scoping him out, making sure that he is safe and won't cause too much trouble knowing what he could know about her and what she just did. All of that being said, I do have a few more descriptive foreshadowing bits to point out. The first being truly tricky and one that I didn't pick up until this most recent reread. The quote says, "His dense voice skims my heart like flint scoured across stone, leaving a residue of sparks that crackle through my icy bloodstream in the strangest of way." Any guesses as to what this one is referring to? No? Anyone? His affinity with Ignos? Flint? Sparks? I applaud you, Sarah A. Parker. I applaud you. Another Boulder reference comes up when describing his voice as he admits that he might be mad. The quote says, I mirror his frown. "Are you mad?" "Possibly," he rumbles, like a voice like a spill of warm rolling rocks. Man, oh man. I would think that I was mad too if my husband had passed years and years ago and I found someone that looked and sounded exactly like him. Of course I would think I was mad. And I would 100% also follow him like Khan just did. I can understand Rave's hesitance. I mean, a completely random stranger following you around, not just for a little bit, but all night. I mean, he was leaving the tavern in a hurry when he ran into her. He was like rushing down the stairs. He runs into her. He stops and he stays the entire set that she plays. That's 7 hours, a 7-hour set that he stays through. And then he questions the people at the tavern about who she was and what her name was. And not only, but then follows her as she leaves the tavern. Yeah, that's a big L for you, Khan. That is not a good look. Not a good look. And he's really, really lucky that she didn't dismember him like she threatens she will. I mean, get it? dismember him because of where her knife is resting. Yeah, okay. That was a bad joke. I'm moving on. I'm even more surprised, knowing how feral of a being Rave can be, that she doesn't slice and dice him, even a little bit, given the fact that he not only followed her, but did his research to get her name from the tavern, which he knows is fake. I think that subconsciously she recognizes him, even though she doesn't know she recognizes him. It's the only explanation I have as for why she doesn't slice and dice him a little bit. Here we have yet another reference to Khan being adept at speaking with Boulder. The quote says, "He makes a gruff sound, drops my wrist, then steps back, forging a small cleft of space between us that feels like a canyon I'm standing on the edge of, the arches of my feet tingling as a strange flutter takes flight inside my belly." Forging a small space that feels like a canyon? The imagery, the foreshadowing. Boulder is the one who created the world. He created all of the canyons and things of the world. So Khan being able to take a step back and forging a canyon between them, oh my God, you cannot have a more beautifully written bit of foreshadowing. Sarah A. Parker is just the queen of it. Lastly, Khan, looking out for the woman he remembers and has held near and dear to his heart for over 123 phases, asks Rave about Tarek. He wants to be sure that she's all right and that she is the one who took care of Tarek herself, so that he knows that she can take care of herself and he doesn't need to worry about her. Rave, covering for herself, says she didn't see a male, only a monster. We all hold our breaths, waiting for Khan to either agree or disagree. And this was a very clever way for Rave to know if she's going to have to do a bit more work or not tonight. But thankfully, he responds with, "On that, I heartily agree," and lets her go. Let me say that one more time. He lets her go. Lets her go. I mean, as he should, because he's very creepily stalked her all night long. But from his point of view, finally finding her after 123 years of looking for her and for pieces of her, that's just, the man that you are, Khan. I would not have the strength. I am so impressed with the amount of restraint that he is showing. It's very indicative of the man that he is, when all he wants to do is pull down her veil and see the face of his loved one, to know she's whole again, and then eventually for her to be his again. I'm not as strong as this man is, but that is how this chapter ends, with him watching her walk away. Chapter 5. Now listen, if I were a secret society, I too would use the trash chutes as a drop point. Nobody wants to go down there, and not just because it's a smelly and a literal trash chute, but also because a monster lives down there. The Velvet Trog is a living, breathing monster, not a myth, and it is well known that she lives in the trash system underneath the gore. That being said, it makes perfect sense for it to be a secret drop point for the Ath. Just clear out a little area underneath a couple of chutes, and you've got a secret hideout that nobody wants to visit, nor would they suspect it, because again, who would want to spend any amount of time down there? Rave is anxious to drop the handoff so the next chapter of the mission can begin, the freeing of the younglings. This project for her has been incredibly personal. At this point in time, on a first read, we know very little of her past and what makes Rave the person she is. But on a reread, it becomes all too clear why this mission is so important to her. She's doing for other younglings what she wished someone would have done for her when she was with the Scavenger King. As much as Rave wants everyone to think that she's such a hard individual, it is things like this where we know otherwise. She's much closer to an M&M than she is a jawbreaker. Once she drops the handoff, Rave takes a minute to daydream about where the younglings will be freed to, the Flourish. She doesn't know exactly where it is and doubts that she ever really will, even going so far as to doubt that she'll ever see it with her own two eyes. But she knows it is underground and somewhere in the south. If you've seen my previous videos, and like I spoke on earlier in this one, I hold a bit of doubt when it comes to the Elding and the Flourish. I think it's quite possible that the Elding and the Scavenger King are the same person. I really hope I'm wrong, but though the implications would be crazy and the storyline would be wild, I do kind of hope that that's not the case, because the amount of baggage that she carries already, you're just throwing so much more damage on top of her. It's kicking a horse while it's down. Her daydreams of the younglings being free fade into those of retirement and what it might look like for her. Turns out, she's not exactly the retirement type. She would much rather clean up the world for those yet to come. See, we're already seeing the softer side. That M&M side of her. She's not a jawbreaker. She's an M&M. Before she heads back to saving the world, our heroine takes a moment of solitude to lay down and admire the world she loves so much. She does so in a very fascinating way that not only paints a picture of the world from the viewpoint of a dragon, but one that hints yet again as to who and what the other entity is within her, a dragon. The quote goes, "Picturing myself as a dragon, wings outstretched, I tip and churn through the pink puffy clouds, so far above the world that all I hear is my heartbeat and the heavy thump of my imaginary wings. All I feel is the flexible strength of my body, untethered, free. An icy calm settles within me like a nestling beast, and I wiggle my toes, my fingers, slowly bringing myself back to reality." I would like to point out that the word feel is in italics here. Italics. As though she can truly feel what she's describing. Like she knows what it's like she's done it before, like she's a dragon. And it also says, an icy calm settles within me like a nestling beast. Yeah, a nestling icy beast, like a nestling moon plume inside of your body. Okay, I digress. Rave comes out of her daydream and just looks up at the sky littered with moons and singles one out in particular, a molten maw, the largest she has ever seen. She says there's a story behind the moon, but doesn't share it with us, mentioning that it was too sad for her to listen to when she was told the story herself. The only other time we get the backstory of a moon is when we hear about Hadian's moon, commonly referred to as Hay's Perch, which is another very sad story. I do wonder if we will ever get the story on this dragon in the second book, the title of it being The Ballad of Falling Dragons. It is very possible, though the backstory might not be the most important part about this moon. The quote says, "Sometimes, however, when I'm lying on what feels like the top of the world with a sleeping city beneath me, I wonder if that moon is ever tempted to fall, to crush Gore in a strike of spite for whatever caused it to soar up there and perch atop the Fade's decorated capital like a lingering threat. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe every last wisp of a dragon's cognizance dissolves the moment they solidify, and they don't decide to fall at all. Maybe something else rips them from the sky. And maybe that dragon didn't consider much of anything when it decided to curl up there. Maybe it wasn't fueled by thoughts of revenge as I would like to believe it was." Rave poses the idea here that the moons don't fall from the sky, but that they are ripped from their perches. We all know the reason that Slatra and Rave fell isn't actually because they fell, but more likely because of Kazari. One of the first theory videos that I ever did was on Kazari and how she's the reason that Slatra fell from the sky hatching Rave. TLDR, if you do the math behind when Kazari was born and the times that she removed her iron necklace and when she learned to speak with Kaelus's language alongside the timeline of when Elwyn and Slatra sailed up to the sky and began their long rest, and when they fell, everything lines up, pointing to Kazari being the very reason that Slatra fell, hatching Rave. This can either point us toward what I discovered with Kazari and Slatra, or it can point toward the moon actually falling and crushing the Gore. Hopefully we're going to get some more answers in April. Sadly, you know who won't be joining us in book 2? Essie. Essentially, the only family member that Rave has, quite literally, her found family. Reading through Essie's notes on a reread just hurts. She's so open and jovial with Rave, even in letter form, that it truly tells the reader who and what she is to Rave. They're more than just friends. They're family. She knows and understands Rave so well that she knows Rave won't read the Lark until her mission is complete. So well that she only gives her 1 or 2 items on the list before she tells Rave to just hand it over to the shopkeeper. I know that neither wants any family, but it's evident through this note that they are family, whether they want to be or not. This note and its significance grant the reader the ability to see both sides of Rave. The side that we met in the beginning, the snarky, no bullshit, get the job done, blood splatter on the Lark sort. And then her softer side, the one that will chase down the Somoths around the ditch and capture them in a jar just to bring them back so that Essie can get some of their powder. The one that doesn't like her friend, not family, going to the dangerous places by herself. Our attention is then stolen by a memory, one of the few that Rave has that aren't sad enough to be tied to a rock and tossed to the bottom of her icy lake. This memory is of the first time that she met Essie. She found her in the tunnels of the Undercity. Filthy, malnourished, and doing her best to blend in as a male, Essie was making the most of a solo life in the belly of the beast. Though she is no longer living in the Undercity, Essie spent enough time surviving alone down there that she knows the ins and outs of it and believes that many useful things can be found there too. Rave, like many that live above, never likes to visit the Undercity unless she really truly has to, and doesn't think that it holds anything of value. Though she would never admit it, I'm sure she's glad that she was down there that day when she found Essie, brought her topside, and showed her the beauty of the world and promised to keep her safe. As she comes out of her walk down memory lane, Rave lends a few moments to worry over the fact that she let the nice-smelling, mysterious loose end of a man who may or may not believe I killed Tarek Relican go, and wonders if she needs to be on constant high alert looking for him. Well, we all know, of course, that she has no need to protect herself around him, except maybe her heart, but that isn't until much later. And if you ask me, I think that she should be a little more careless with her heart when it comes to that man. And that is where we cap off Chapter 5 and this week's episode. Now, before I go, I do want to share a few quotes that stand out to me. Rave has such a stellar inner monologue that I've often have tons of quotes highlighted, but I don't want to share them within the deep dive because it's going to just be quote after quote just going over her inner monologue. And so I'm making a segment at the end of each video that has just the quotes that I really like and that I find funny. The first one is, survival's funny. Some wear it like a whisper, others like a scream. Mine's a scorched skeleton of flame, forged rage that keeps me upright, keeps me moving forward. In fact, the second one being, in fact, even if he, Tarek, were a pile of shit on the pavement, I'd still go out of my way to stomp on him. Me too, girl, me too. The next one says, I tuck my veil back into place, hiding the bottom half of my face as I move to the wind tunnel's entrance and peek out, looking left and right along the thin path etched into the wall like a groove, making sure my cloaked observer hasn't shown up to play catch the iron blade between your ribs. Another one is, I unbutton the overlay on my skirt, rip the top layer from my bodice, and pull the tarnished fabric free, revealing the perfect replica beneath. I'm sorry. She knew that this job was going to be so bloody and bad that she quite literally has a replica underneath so that she can, instead of changing whole outfits, she just gets rid of a layer. Genius. Genius. Another quote says, leaning forward, I watch him plummet toward the wall's rocky sawtooth base far below. He impales upon a slice of stone that cuts all the way through his abdomen, and I find myself wishing I'd kept him alive so he could experience it. Damn. Missed opportunity. Dude, I agree. He definitely deserved to have felt that. And the last quote that I have today is, sadness is like stones that stack inside of you, making it harder to move. Ignorance is my self-preservation tonic, and I'll swear by it until the day I die. Except the fact that sadness is indeed all of the stones that you have stacked up inside of you. You quite literally tie all of your sadness to the stones and toss them into your icy lake. There will come a point where it will be too full of stones. The water will all displace. You'll have to do something with it. So you're going to have to face all of those sad things at some point here, Rave. I just hope that it doesn't kill you in the process. And that is the entirety of chapters 3, 4, and 5. I'm hoping to continue doing 3 chapter segments like I did here today. And I hope that you all come back for next week's. Have a wonderful week. Bye.